All right, welcome everybody. My name is Manisha. I'm the Director of Health Professions Advising, and today we're going to be finishing up the app prep series with preparing for your interviews. I am going to turn off my video momentarily just so I can focus on the presentation, but I will come back for the Q&A. Wrong button. Again, this is going to be more of a general conversation about preparing for your interviews. If you have so many specific questions that you're comfortable sharing, you're welcome to unmute or put it in the chat. And as I mentioned, we'll have more of a conversation during interview week as we talk about specific aspects of interviewing. Just like with all aspects of your application, it is really important to approach interviewing the same as you did with your personal statement, of a competency-based approach, meaning how are you sharing with your interviewer the competencies you've built, regardless of health field. I know these are AAMC 17 competencies, but I think this applies to all health fields. But how are you revealing these skills and competencies through the conversation based on what questions they're answering? So similar to your writing, you do want to keep these words and these competencies in the back of your mind as you approach your responses. I always have this as a fun slide, the excitement of when you get the interview, you are on top of everything, and then the what now. From the time you submitted your primary or secondary applications to potentially when you get your interview, it can be months. And you really do want to use the time in between while you're waiting for interviews to actually start preparing. How would I approach my interview? How would I approach the conversations to affirm my decision to pursue the health field, but also convince the interviewer I'm a good fit for the school? And so that's part of why schools interview. They are, in terms of everything you've submitted thus far, you've been a flat profile. They have read your writing, they've seen your academics and test scores, and they have a sense of your ability and what you've written. So the point of the interview is truly to get a sense of who you are, those non-academic factors, evaluate your readiness for the profession and school, and put a face to you, make you three-dimensional. Schools are, as they interview candidates, as they bring people in, they're building their class. They're trying to, schools bring in more folks than the actual seats, typically 3 to 4 times more. So the sense is they're trying to choose who will exemplify the mission and values of the school, but also the class that they're building. They're going to teach you the knowledge. They want to get a sense of your interpersonal skills, your communication skills, your self-awareness of what you offer, your strengths, your weaknesses. How do you approach decision making? So in summing all of that, they're trying to understand, again, what, your understanding of what values you bring to the field and the school, and how you've developed yourself thus far. So a few things to know about the, getting ready for your interview. Your interview can look like, your day can vary. You can have one interview, you can have multiple interviews, but the school will plan the interview. Right now, many schools are still virtual, but we are seeing, specific to like dentistry, more schools are returning to an in-person format. So it is important to know when you are offered an interview, not just what format will the interview take place, but also where. Are you going to be on an online platform, or are you actually having to go somewhere? Interviews are often with faculty or even current students evaluating you as a cohort or as a colleague and faculty in terms of, again, that raw material do you offer that they can shape. In looking at formats, one-on-one which is the most traditional. You are interviewed by one other person. It's a conversation. Panel or small group. Panel meaning two or more people are interviewing you. Small group meaning you are either two or more candidates are being interviewed by one or more interviewers. Multiple mini interviews, it's like speed dating, but you are going through different stations of interviews. So short questions, one person is evaluating you, and you move on to the next station. There's also pre-recorded, where you're given a link, pre-record questions, and you actually record yourself and submit it to the school. Open and blind. Open meaning the interviewer has had an opportunity to review your application. To what extent, we never know, but they've had that opportunity. Blind meaning the interview knows nothing about you other than you have been successfully selected to interview. I'm going to pause there. Any questions for me thus far? Anything that comes up that you want me to go back over? All right, if there's nothing, I'm going to keep going. So what does preparation look like when you're getting ready for the interview? You have an interview, whether it's a few weeks out or a few months out. You really need to be ready to answer questions about anything. Questions can be from your academic background, your decision to pursue healthcare or that specific field, the experiences you bring, your motivations. And so, given, as I mentioned, it might be months since you last saw your primary application or secondaries, it's critical that you review everything that you've written and submitted to that school to, again, remind yourself of what you wrote, but how can you build that into a conversation? How can you share more than what was written? You all have had character limitations in your writing. This is truly the time to expand on that in terms of what's relevant to what they're asking. You always want to be prepared for follow-up questions in terms of understanding the material. I always say if you wrote it down, you've got to be able to talk about it. So brush up so you don't look uncertain during the interview, and don't assume you'll remember it. I once spoke to a candidate that had done research for a couple of years as an undergrad and got an interview at her dream school. She didn't think to brush up on her research because that wasn't her interest. However, oddly enough, her interviewer had the same background and started asking questions just out of curiosity. And she was stunned because she couldn't remember exactly what she had done because it was a couple years back. What do you think happened? How do you think that interview proceeded after that? Denied, harsh, but the conversation became stilted and awkward. Where when you walk into an interview, think of it as getting an A in a class. You only have to keep your position. And so not being able to respond, she turned what could have been a fruitful conversation to a very awkward, and lost the interest of the interviewer. So do think about what you wrote. In thinking about how to approach, and we'll talk more about it in research, but thinking of your own background, think about examples and evidence of your past that speak to those competencies and attributes. Practice telling these stories and answering questions out loud. In my head, I sound like a Nobel laureate. Talking out loud is very different. And so you want to know how you approach difficult questions, questions about yourself, questions about what your experiences are or motivation. Record yourself. Record yourself on Zoom or on your phone. Play it back. Listen to your responses. Learn everything about that school. via social media, websites, current students. Go to info sessions. Even if you feel like I've done a lot of research, if that school's offering an info session, I strongly encourage you to attend. Get in front of admissions. The more chances you have to learn about the school, the nuances of the school, and get in front of someone who's in decision making, the better it helps you. And then when it makes sense, connect your responses back to the school or the field that you plan to go into. And we'll touch more upon that when we talk about how to break down your responses. Again, do your research on the school. What makes them unique? Missions start sounding very similar. The didactic portion is going to look very similar. So what is unique about the school, whether through their blogs, social media, current news? Brush up on current issues within the field that you plan to go into. What's been going on over the last 6 months to a year? Issues and controversies that present in healthcare in your future health profession, be familiar with them. How is dentistry proceeding? What are the major challenges in vet med? How has a pandemic or changes in healthcare impacted certain populations? Be familiar with them. And then ultimately, why are you a good fit for that school? What value do you bring to that school? Why are your interests aligned with the school's interests? This speaks to fit. And then at the end, ask questions, but they got to be good ones. You don't want to ask something that you can readily find online. Ask questions more to that demonstrate your interest of really wanting to understand the school. An interview is more like you're courting each other. They're courting you, but you're also courting them. And again, that's where that fit comes from. You want to be conversational. The best interviews are more of a dialogue, not necessarily a question answer outside of maybe an MMI. And that's a different topic altogether. But in thinking about who is interviewing you, you may not know, but you may know that they're a faculty or a student. So what would you want to ask a faculty about the school? What would you want to know from a student that's attending the school? Consider opportunities within the school, access to those opportunities, what daily life might look like, or anything else that's important to you that demonstrates interest, but also shows that you are really considering the school and program. I'm going to pause again. Any questions thus far? All right, I'm going to keep on going. So questions can vary greatly with what they're asking. They can be wide open, open-ended, the tell me about yourself, or non-academic interest, or why medicine, why dentistry, why dietetics. They can be asking you to respond in a way that shows your personal maturity and self-awareness. How have you handled a difficult situation or conversation? In healthcare, regardless of your field, do you think at some point you will have a challenge or have to have a difficult conversation or something unexpected? And that's a question I'm posing. Okay, I'll answer. The answer is yes. And so they want to know, how have you handled this in the past? Behavioral interviews are about how past behavior reflects future, your future behavior. So think about those. An interview isn't necessarily about thinking of examples on the spot. It's pre-thinking. Just like when you pre-write secondaries or supplements, you want to pre-think, how would I answer these various categories? How would I think about my maturity in terms of strengths, weaknesses, challenges, success, proud moments? Have at least 2 or 3 examples of different topics so that depending on how a question is asked of you, you can answer, kind of select that right example and put it into that question. Current issues, as I mentioned, what is going on in your specific health field over the last year or a couple of years? How has your field been evolving? Thinking about your own experiences with healthcare practitioners in your field, identifying and being able to speak to what makes a good dentist, what makes a good doctor or a dietitian. And thinking about what you know about the field, affirming, yes, I still want to do this, or here's where I see myself in 10 or 15 years. And that 10 or 15 years can be tricky. So let's say you are pursuing medicine, 4 years of medical school, 3+ years of residency. 10 years from today, you're only 3 years out of school or at the end of your full schooling. So what might that look like to you? And being able to talk about challenges. No one wants health professional school to be the first time you experience any type of challenge. So think about what challenge has looked like for you and how you're going to approach addressing it. You can easily Google sample questions and think about responses. You don't want to memorize. I can always tell an authentic, thoughtful response to one that has been over-rehearsed. Authenticity is really important. So good question. There was a question in the chat. How should we approach? Tell me about yourself. You've heard different things to include personal details or more details about your career. So that's an excellent question. And the response to that is, how do they frame it? If it's a very general, tell me about yourself, or is it tell me about yourself and your interest in medicine? Those are 2 different questions. The first one is broader. I don't know if I would necessarily tie back in, and this is why I want to be, if I just use doctor as an example, a doctor, I would, like an autobiography, highlight a few things about myself. Now, those few things about yourself might include why you chose to pursue, let's say, a research opportunity or a clinical opportunity or something that you are very passionate about, but you are not ending with, and this is why I'm pursuing medicine. That's not what they've asked you. And it is important to listen to what they're asking you so that you're responding to what they're asking you. Now, the question, tell me about yourself and what's influenced you to pursue healthcare. Absolutely. You're tying your responses back into why you're there that day, why you're pursuing that health field. Does that help, Jennifer? Do you understand the differences, or does anyone have any questions related to that? Okay, so how to balance memorizing and being genuine. So the way you want to approach it is, how do you prepare for presentations? I know that I get very nervous and I like to practice. So what I might do when I was newer at presenting or interviewing is I might actually write out a script. And bear with me as I walk down this road, because I just said don't memorize. I write out a script because that's how I get my thoughts down. I don't like it jumbling in my head. So I write out a script, I copy it down, I read it out loud a few times. That's how I start remembering key points. And then I'm going to put that paper aside and simply start talking it out. So I'm not trying to hit word for word what I wrote, but more the ideas. So that's my process. I'm at a place now where I can go by bullet points, bullet pointing those ideas out. So again, I'm fluent in my ideas And again, what comes out of my mouth may vary day to day, but I'm fluent and I have those ideas down pat. And then just talk it out. Don't worry about the words. Maybe you forgot an idea. I remember last year I had to do a exactly 3-minute presentation to a large group of potential donors. I was extremely nervous because this might make or break, any funding HPA might receive. And I had my key points. I got up there. I know I missed 2 of them, but I was genuine enough in my responses with the other ones that, yes, I was kind of kicking myself. I forgot the numbers of who we serve, but I got enough across that I saw smiles and nodding faces. So practice, not word for word, practice the ideas or key words and go with it. That's the balance. And at some point, as you're practicing with family, friends, HPA, if you start sounding over rehearsed, we're going to tell you, like, stop. I've actually had to do that with someone who perfectly memorized her 3.5-minute tell me about yourself. And I actually paused and said, are you reading this to me? Because it was via Zoom. She's like, no, like you're over rehearsed. There's no genuine ounce in there. So other things to do, if remembering as much as possible is comfortable to you, then build in those natural pauses. As we talk, we do naturally pause. We do naturally take a breath. Make sure you're not just machine gunning your answer to get it out as fast as possible, but you are forcing yourself to pause, to breathe, and that helps with the authenticity. Right? Interviewing isn't natural by any means. So do what makes you comfortable, but you can help authenticity by pausing, just like I did there. Watching your inflection. We naturally don't speak in a monotone. So have inflection as you're pausing and talking. Take a breath. Breathe from your gut. All of these help with an authenticity and natural soundingness. All right, so let's talk about presentation. Your attitude is everything. And that first impression, those first few minutes are critical. So you want to be confident when answering your question. And there's a fine line between confidence and ego, right? We don't want to go border on egotistical, but we do, with the inflection, speak to something. If I'm asking what's something you're proud of, then speak to that. Manage, so positive self-talk, visualize your success, manage your anxiety. You're going to sputter. You might say something that you completely, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or I forgot that. Get over it. Keep going. We'll talk about what happens if you derail in a couple minutes, but manage yourself. That's the best part. One of my tricks when going to an interview, I used to actually acknowledge I'm nervous, but I'm so excited to be here today. So I acknowledge the elephant in the room, my nerves, but that helps me get over it. Professionalism, slang and filler words. Have you been told you're an ummer? Don't like, don't like. Practice speaking a little more calmly, a little bit slowly. Pause instead of using filler words. Also keep in mind, slang and acronyms vary, not just by generation, but regionally. So be mindful that you're using a little bit more simpler language so that, again, whatever you're saying is not going over someone's head. Calm, clear, and confident. Enunciate. Have you been told you're a very fast speaker? Then slow yourself down. I naturally speak really fast. What I'm doing right now is years of practicing enunciating. Don't speak any faster than you can to enunciate because I have to be able to understand and hear you. I am a very fast talker naturally. What I'm doing today is practice. So again, you want to make sure the person sitting across from you, whether in person or on Zoom, can hear you. Be kind to everyone. You never know who has influence over your interview. Once you are either online or you're anywhere traveling, you are on your best behavior because you never know. Watch your nonverbal communication, and culturally, sometimes this can be hard. Eye contact, body posture, hand gestures, fidgeting. I'm going to come back on video for a second to show what this can look like online. And so eye contact, right? I'm going to try to get a little closer, right? My camera is eye level. This is me making eye contact. This is me looking everywhere else. Or if my camera was lower, you actually, like if it, if I don't line it up right, it doesn't even look like I'm looking. So if you want to have notes on your screen, do it in such a way that it's close to your camera as possible, but you do want to look at the screen. You don't have to stare it down, just like you wouldn't in person, but you want to do it in a way that demonstrates you're making eye contact. Body posture. This is me slumping. This is me, sitting comfortably while I'm typing. This is me being intense. None of that. We don't want none of that. Have a comfortable chair, sit back. I'm still going to use hand gestures occasionally. But just like as if I was in person, I'm going to pay attention to how I present myself. Fidgeting. Zoom has ruined us. People do this unintentionally or play with things on their desk, clicking pens, looking at things. Focus, watch this. If you know you're a wiggler, or sometimes I think I did it. I locked my chair, but I realized over time I was like leaning back, far back on my chair. I actually locked it to stop myself from doing that because I started slumping. So again, be mindful. Treat, whether it's in person or virtual, that interview as if they see all of you. Clear your desk, wear the full outfit. That puts you in a mindset, but be present for that interview. All right, let's talk a little bit about your responses. So in thinking about your response, you do want to have a little bit of a formula. It helps the listener understand and follow with what you're saying. But they've seen your application, they want to see the person behind it, so show them your personality behind those experiences. If you have a behavioral interview, which is again, how do your past experiences demonstrate your future potential, then follow a way to answer those questions. There are a lot of acronyms out there, PARC, PAR, CAR. I use PARC. Up to you what helps, but go through it step by step. It really helps the listener. It's going to help you from derailing or help you pull yourself back should you sidetrack on your answer. But if you're asking a question, so can you tell me about a time, or when have you, or can you give me an example of? Briefly state the problem, very briefly. I don't need to know the whole thing, just enough to understand the gist of the story. Briefly, what did you do there? What was your role in that situation? Whether it was a positive situation, a situation that you were fixing something, or a situation where you contributed to the challenge. What happened based on what you did? Because of my involvement, this happened. And then what did you learn? After all is said and done, what did you learn from what had in that experience? And then if appropriate, I didn't add the parka, but the A, application to the future. If it makes sense, what might you do different? Or if faced with a situation again. But that is the step-by-step you want to follow. I mentioned this before. Please answer the question that you were asked, not give the response you want to give. There are certain things you're like, I really want to tell them. I really want them to know this about me. Doesn't matter how much you want that unless it applies to the question they were asked. That's the first thing that's going to be an offense. If you don't answer the question that's being asked, then what am I thinking about you? What do you think? I asked you a question, you're giving me a different response. What do I think? I'm thinking you don't pay attention. I'm thinking you're not listening to me. I'm thinking there's the maturity lacking. So listen, pause, take a breath, put your thoughts together, respond to what you were asked. Within that response, reveal parts of yourself that make sense. Again, practice, practice, practice. It's embarrassing. I get it. You don't want other people to see you. You don't want to record yourself and watch it. But that is the best way to understand, do you have what are your strengths in interviewing? What do you do well? Do you have any tics that you need to overcome? Any habits, bad habits? So practicing and recording is your way to practice in a safe environment, get that feedback so that you can be your best authentic self during the actual interview. Couple other things, some details. As I mentioned, some interviews are going back in person, some are still virtual. If you know your interview is in person, then know everything about it. Transportation, how are you getting there? Are you traveling further than what you can drive? If you're driving, what's the traffic situation like? Know where you need to be and how you'll get there. If you are having to stay at a hotel, how are you getting from the airport to the hotel to the interview? What are you doing with your luggage? Does the school hold on to your luggage? Do they have that offer? Is there a changing room? Should weather be incremental? When interviews were all in person, schools that were in incremental weather parts of the country had this, but you need to ask. And avoid surprises. The more planned out you are, the more you'll be able to address any challenges. If it's virtual, you want to make sure you have access to a power source, quietness. You've let your housemates know, I'm interviewing, leave me alone, that they're not draining the internets, or stepping in. If you have pets, what are you doing with your pets? If you have children, where are your children during the interview? Again, as much as you can manage your environment, be prepared. That might be at a desk, that might be at a library, that might be in your car, wherever you can have the privacy that you will not be interrupted, wherever your internet and power source are the strongest. Regardless of in-person or virtual, please dress professionally and groom meticulously. There's something to be said, even virtually, that you are in the full outfit. It puts you in the right headspace. Also, I have heard enough horror stories over the last few years where somebody only wore half the outfit and stood up. Don't be that person. Nobody wants to see that. If it's been a while since you wore your interview clothes, try them on. I remember during my last interview, post-baby, I did not think to try on my suit. Tried it on Friday, 3 days before my interview, and was like, oh dear, this isn't going to work, which meant I had to hustle to a store. And this was when interviews were in person, to find something that matched the body I was unfamiliar with. You don't want to put that added pressure. You also don't need something extremely expensive or many items. A suit or a professional attire is sufficient to get you through all your interviews. No one's going to remember what you wore. They haven't met you. What you wore Tuesday to one school's interview can be the same thing you wear 2 days later. No one will know. You just need one outfit, and it does not have to be expensive. It just has to fit. Conservative is good. I know in California, we tend towards away from conservatism, but if you're interviewing at a private school or other parts of the country where they might be a little bit more conservative, you might want to think about that. I'm also one for what's important to you, right? You don't want to hide who you are. You want to be on the professional side. But I will fully admit I have purple hair and I have piercings. I don't take those out, nor do I undye my hair, though I might darken it a little bit. But I'm still going to express who I am. That's important to me. I also have yet to wear a black suit to an interview. I like color personally. I pick jewel tones, so they're darker, but that represents me. I'm also going to only interview at places that I feel like I'd be a good fit. I've worked at public schools and private schools. I've adjusted mildly, but not too much. Again, whatever is important to you, we want to present professional. Body language, treat everyone with respect. There's no need for you to have devices on you. If you live in the Apple universe, be mindful of all the things that might beep. If one thing beeps, I have many things that beep. My phone, my watch, my computer, my iPad. So turn everything off that you don't need. That doesn't help you if things start beeping, and it's in fact distracting. I don't know if you just heard, but my computer went beep beep because it's reminding me of the next thing I have to be at. So silence notifications, all of it. You don't need things to distract you. And that's really it. Confidence is the best thing that you can do for yourself. Having confidence in how you present, having confidence that you deserve that interview. Not ego, but confidence. You got yourself there. So they want to meet you. So show them who you are when you get there. That is it. That is all I have in terms of a formal presentation. If it's all right with you all, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm also going to turn off the recording, and we can have more of a conversation from here.